In 1484, a Norwegian woman named Gunhild was burned alive. Her crime? Carving this symbol into her doorframe. Some symbols were never meant to survive. Hunted by priests, banned by kings, erased from history. One mark could shield you from death itself. One rune summoned cosmic justice that no pope could override. And one symbol was so dangerous that possessing it meant execution without trial. Tonight, I'm revealing 5 forbidden runes the church desperately tried to destroy and failed. From protection marks that threatened religious control to symbols of rebellion carved in secret, subscribe right now, because this knowledge was almost lost forever, and you're about to understand why the church feared simple marks more than armies.
Number 5. Berkano, the unkillable symbol. Starting at number 5, Berkano, the rune that proved you can't kill an idea. Right now in 2025, archaeologists are using ground-penetrating radar on medieval churches across Norway, and they keep finding the same thing. Berkano, carved into foundation stones, hidden under Christian altars, embedded where priests walked every single day for centuries. This wasn't vandalism. This was patient, deliberate rebellion. Berkano looks simple. 2 curves like a pregnant belly or the letter B. But to Germanic peoples, this was the birch rune, the symbol of unstoppable rebirth. And here's why the church couldn't stand it. Christianity promised one path to salvation through the church. Berkano said something completely different. You can burn the tree, but the roots remain. Norse mothers would carve it into their children's cradles at night, whispering the old prayers. If soldiers came, if plague struck, if the family line seemed to end, something would survive. A memory, a song, a mark on a stone waiting centuries to be found. Its primary power, conceptual immortality. The church could control your body, your land, your public worship, but they couldn't stop ideas from hibernating like birch seeds under snow, waiting for spring that might come 300 years later. Modern imaging technology has revealed that Berkano appears inside Christianized buildings more than any other rune, hidden under paint, carved into beams. One church in Iceland had 17 Berkano marks under the floorboards, placed there during construction by workers who knew they'd never see Christianity fall, but believed someone eventually would. They were right. You're looking at those symbols right now. If a rune about rebirth made the church nervous, wait until you see number 4, because this symbol didn't promise growth. It promised that everything you built would eventually be destroyed, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it.
Number 4. Hagalaz, the unstoppable storm. The rune that says your God can't save you from this. And that's exactly why it was heresy. In medieval Bavaria, farmers would carve this symbol on their barns after dark. If caught, they'd claim it was a Christian cross that got damaged, but everyone knew the truth. Hagalaz was a negotiation with forces older than Scripture. Here's what you need to understand about this rune. Christianity in medieval Europe promised that faith could protect you. Pray hard enough, be righteous enough, pay the church enough, and God would shield you from suffering. Hagalaz said no. This rune, shaped like geometric hailstones or shattered ice, represents the mathematical certainty of destruction. Not evil destruction, natural destruction. The forest fire that clears dead wood. The hailstorm that tests which crops are actually strong. The crisis that reveals which parts of your life need to die. Germanic peoples carved Hagalaz into boundary stones as a warning. Beyond this point, forces operate that don't care about your prayers. They scratched it onto curse tablets. They marked it on shields, not as protection, but as an invocation, calling chaos onto the battlefield so skilled warriors could exploit the disorder. But here's what made the church go absolutely insane about this symbol. Hagalaz is the only rune in the Elder Futhark that cannot be reversed or softened. Every other rune has alternative meanings, depending on position or context. Hagalaz always means the same thing. Destruction is coming. The universe has selected something for termination. You can't pray it away. You can't buy indulgences against it. You can only prepare, endure, and rebuild. Its primary power? Inevitable disruption. Church records from 11th century Norway document multiple trials where people were accused of summoning the hail demon by carving this rune near Christian property. The defendants would say the same thing. I'm not summoning anything. I'm acknowledging reality. That's rebellion at the deepest level. Not attacking the church's power, but simply refusing to pretend it matters when the storm comes. When archaeologists excavated medieval execution sites, they found Hagalaz carved into dungeon walls by prisoners awaiting death. These weren't curses, they were final statements. You can kill me, but your own hailstorm is coming. The universe doesn't play favorites. The church would chisel out these runes before burying the bodies, trying to erase even that last act of defiance. If you think a rune guaranteeing destruction is powerful, you're not ready for the top 3, because we're entering territory where symbols don't just affect individuals, they challenge the very foundation of who gets to exist and why.
Number 3. Othala, the dangerous claim. We've reached the top 3, where runes become political weapons. Number 3. Othala, the symbol that says, this land is ours. And I need to address something immediately. In the 20th century, the absolute worst people in history stole this symbol and corrupted it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about why medieval Christians feared Othala for completely different reasons, reasons that actually matter to understanding power and control. Right now, in modern Germany, you can be arrested for displaying this rune in certain contexts, not because of what it originally meant, but because of what it was twisted into. But here's the thing the church understood centuries earlier. Even in its original form, Othala was one of the most dangerous political symbols ever created. Othala means ancestral land, but not in a legal sense, in a spiritual sense. The rune looks like an enclosure, a marked sacred space. When Germanic families carved this into boundary stones, they weren't just saying, we own this property. They were declaring, our ancestors are buried here. Their spirits are in this soil. Our legitimacy comes from blood and time, not from any king's decree or any pope's blessing. You see the problem? Christianity taught that kings ruled by God's grace. The church decided who had authority, divine appointment from above. Othala said, my right to this land comes from my grandmother's grandmother's bones beneath these rocks. You can't grant it and you can't take it away. That terrified them. Its primary power? Generational legitimacy. When Christian conquerors arrived demanding conversion, they'd offer a deal. Accept baptism, keep your land. And many people did, publicly. But then, at night, they'd carve Othala into hidden locations, under floorboards, inside wells, behind loose stones. They were creating spiritual deeds, documents that said, you can control this land politically, you can plant your crosses and build your churches, but metaphysically, cosmically, this ground belongs to us, and it always will. Medieval church records are full of complaints. Priests would report that newly converted families refused to bury their dead in Christian cemeteries. They'd sneak out at night and bury them in old family plots marked with Othala, maintaining the unbroken chain of ancestral claim. The church couldn't stop it. You can execute people, but carved stones remain, silent, patient, waiting. In 2019, construction crews in Denmark tore down a medieval church and found something incredible. The original foundation stones underneath were covered in Othala runes. The Christian church had literally been built on top of a pagan claim marker.
The old families who carved those symbols never saw the church fall, but they knew something the priests didn't. Stone lasts longer than doctrine. If you think claiming ancestral land is dangerous, the symbol at number 2 is about to blow your mind because it doesn't defend territory. It delivers justice through divine violence and suggests a moral law higher than the Bible itself.
Number 2. Tiwaz, the cosmic justice rune. Hundreds of Viking Age swords have been found with Tiwaz carved into the blade right next to Christian crosses. Archaeologists used to think this was confusion, people mixing religions. They were wrong. It was a declaration. I'll serve your God in public, but if your God fails me, I trust in something older. Tiwaz belongs to Tyr, the one-handed god of cosmic law, and his myth is brutal. The gods needed to chain Fenrir, the world-ending wolf. The beast demanded someone place their hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Only Tyr volunteered, knowing the gods would betray the promise. The wolf bit off his hand. Tyr sacrificed his sword hand to uphold cosmic law. Justice required personal loss. Now here's where this gets absolutely wild. When Germanic warriors carved Tiwaz onto their weapons, they weren't asking for victory. They were making a statement. I have examined my cause against the oldest laws in the universe. I have found it just. Universe, you may now judge. That's not a prayer. That's a challenge to reality itself. The church couldn't tolerate this because Christianity taught that morality comes from God and Scripture. The church defines what's sinful. Bishops determine what's just. Tiwaz said something radically different. There's a law older than the Bible, written into the fabric of existence. A man can stand before God and before Tyr and receive different verdicts. You see the problem? If warriors believe in justice, independent of biblical law, they might refuse orders from Christian rulers. They might say, this command violates cosmic order, even if it aligns with church doctrine. And that's exactly what happened. Crusade-era records document Germanic warriors refusing to massacre civilians, carving Tiwaz into the ground, and declaring the orders unjust by older law. They were executed for disobedience, but their defiance came from a worldview the church couldn't erase. The universe has standards, and bishops don't get to override them. Its primary power, cosmic alignment. Tiwaz doesn't protect you from consequences. It declares you've accepted them because you're right. It's the spiritual equivalent of, I'd rather die standing than live kneeling. Tiwaz appears carved into medieval prison walls more than any other rune, not as decoration, as final testimony. Prisoners who believed they were wrongly condemned would carve it before execution, essentially saying, this court may have authority, but it lacks legitimacy. The universe knows the truth. Someday, someone will find this mark and understand I was right. Some of those marks are still there, in dungeons, under European castles, waiting to be proven correct. If you thought cosmic justice was the ultimate power, you're not prepared for number 1, because the final rune doesn't attack or judge or claim. It does something far more dangerous. It offers protection that doesn't require the church's permission. And that made it the most hunted symbol in Christian Europe.
Number 1. Algiz, the direct connection. The rune the church feared above all others. Algiz appears on over 60% of all discovered protective amulets from Germanic Europe, more than any other symbol, any other rune, any other mark. More people were executed for possessing Algiz than any other rune combined. Why? Because Algiz promised direct access to divine protection without priests, without prayers, without the church as intermediary. Look at the shape. Branches reaching upward, or a person with arms raised to heaven. That's not decorative. That's the spiritual posture, direct connection to cosmic forces. The church's entire power structure depended on being the gateway to God. You needed baptism, you needed confession, you needed sacraments administered by ordained priests. The institution controlled access to salvation. Algiz said, "No, you don't. Carve this rune and you are protected by forces that answer to no earthly authority. Not the Pope, not kings, not scripture." Germanic peoples carved Algiz onto everything: warriors' shields, pregnant mothers' door frames, travelers' walking sticks, children's cradles. Each carving was an act of spiritual independence. I am protected, and I didn't need to ask your permission. Its primary power? Unmediated divine connection. And the church knew they couldn't compete with that, because Algiz had something Christianity never could: tens of thousands of years of belief weight. Ancestors going back to the Ice Age had carved this symbol and survived. That's why more executions, more trials, more desperate attempts to erase Algiz than any other rune. Because every time someone carved it, they were declaring independence from the only power structure the church had: control over salvation itself. You've now seen the 5 runes the church tried to erase from history. Berkano, the promise that ideas never die. Hagalaz, the guarantee that destruction comes for everyone. Othala, the claim that land belongs to those whose ancestors bled for it. Tiwaz, the appeal to justice higher than scripture. Algiz, the direct line to divine protection that needs no permission. They carved these symbols in secret. They died protecting this knowledge, and they were right to believe someone would eventually find them. You just did. If these forbidden symbols moved you, hit that like button to honor the people who kept them alive. Drop a comment telling me which rune resonates with your soul. And subscribe, because next week I'm revealing the sacred geometry the Vatican locked in their vault for 400 years. Some knowledge was never meant to be controlled.